Welcome back to the Scout Academy. Joining me today is Kevin Lohraff from the Missouri Department of Conservation to talk about why you should care about invasive species.
Well, good morning. We're here on the Savannah at Runge Nature Center here in Jefferson City, and I want to talk a little bit about the importance of this Savannah and the importance of natural communities on our landscape. The Savannah, as you can see, is a grassland with wildflowers and with interspersed trees, and really it's the best of both worlds between a forest and a prairie. So in a savanna like this one, you get just tremendous potential for food production, for animals, not only for food but for shelter and for denning sites and nesting sites. So you have the production of the plants, all the thousands of native insects that live on the plants, and you also have the production of acorns and other nuts, as well as fruits, mushrooms, berries, other kinds of things in the savanna. So this healthy landscape is exactly what we want out in our state, whether on private land or on public land. A part of restoring these landscapes and keeping them healthy is getting rid of invasive species, which always threaten our native plants and our native landscapes. Right now behind me you have a bunch of wildflowers, but you also see some plants that you see look dead, and the reason for that is because they were just sprayed just last week. This is Sericea lespedeza, one of our exotic invasive species that can threaten a landscape like this. What happens is they can completely take over and choke out the native species and reduce the biodiversity of an area. We all depend on these natural landscapes for food, for water, for healthy water, for clean air, and the more diverse they are, the healthier they are. So our livelihood, our health depends on the health of the landscape, and keeping invasive species down is just one way we need to make sure we can take care of these landscapes. Here on the Savannah, it's interesting to note that research shows most people in the world prefer this kind of landscape. It's aesthetically pleasing to most people in the world. This kind of sweeping, rolling hills with interspersed trees makes people feel comfortable, and it's their sense of beauty. That's why a lot of parks that we have throughout the nation kind of replicate this kind of look. So not only are our landscapes important for our health and our well-being, but also for the aesthetic value and our sense of beauty in our lives. I wanted to point out a few of the wildflowers that we have here on our savanna. You can see right behind me some grayhead coneflower. We have the purple coneflower. We have rattlesnake master. These great big wide leaf plants are prairie dock. We also have the tallest one there is compass plant. We have indigo. There's blazing star. And then as you look out on the savanna, you can see some of our native grasses, like a little blue stem and big blue stem, and all plants that look beautiful and look beautiful together, but they also, the more species you have in an area, the healthier that area is. So it's not only beautiful, but it indicates the health of an area also. I want to talk about this plant right here behind me, this milkweed plant. A lot of people have learned to identify the monarch, and they recognize the monarch as one of our beautiful butterflies. Actually, there's only one plant that supports the monarch butterfly, and that's different types of milkweed. If you don't have milkweed in your area, you're not going to have monarch butterflies. And so the monarch butterflies are in a decline right now. We know that their food plant is the only plant that monarch caterpillars eat. We know a lot of those native plants, native milkweeds are in decline, and so that's one example of the relationship that are very dependent. Some animals only can depend on only one species of plant, and so it's important to have that biodiversity of plants so you have the biodiversity of insects and birds and so on. Another important topic that comes up here is the idea of pollinators. You know, you can see butterflies and different species of bees here behind me, and those are important pollinators, not just for our wildflowers that we have on our natural landscapes, but also for our food crops. Not only our vegetable and food crops that we eat as people, but also those crops that we grow for our livestock. So pollinators are important for people, not just in natural landscapes, but in our commercial food production as well. And this includes not only our native bees, but also moths and butterflies and even some beetles. And so keeping these pollinators healthy is important for people for a lot of different reasons. This area behind me, you can kind of see, is the opposite of what we were talking about when it comes to biodiversity. What you see behind me is an area that's pretty much taken over by eastern red cedars, the tree. Eastern red cedar is a native tree, but it's also very invasive. Without its checks and balances put on it by fires, natural fires or prescribed fires, these eastern red cedars can take over any of our landscapes, and that includes not only prairies and glades and savannas, but also even forests. So you see very low diversity here. We have the canopy is dominated by only one species, which is the cedar, and you don't see any small trees or recruitment of smaller trees. You do have a ground layer of plants, but a lot of those are invasive plants and exotic invasive plants. So this is an example of an area that is suffering from low diversity, and that's a result of a lack of fire and other management practices that people can do. So you can see the cedars so thick that they're even choking themselves out. Most of the lower limbs are dead from halfway down, and you can see a lot of them are dead and falling over. So not only a very kind of ugly area, but also an area low in diversity and just not a very aesthetically pleasing area either. So this is really the goal of invasive species removal, is a healthy landscape like this. Healthy landscape like this produces food for wildlife, it produces shelter, produces space and nesting habitat for animals. A healthy landscape like this is not only beautiful to people and it's important for wildlife, but it's also critical to our health and well-being. We depend on healthy natural systems to provide us with healthy air, healthy water, and healthy food. So a biodiverse area that's low in invasive species will be able to produce that for us, and all those benefits that we talked about, not only for wildlife, but also for people.
That's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. See you next time on the Scout Academy.